Morning, Ali. Morning, Rosalind. Rosalind and Neil are watching it together. Morning, Brian. Morning, David. Morning, Stephen. Morning, Stephen McNeil. Ian, Maggie, and here we go here. Morning, Stuart. Moving fast. Morning, George. Sheena. Morning, Hugh. Morning, SD. Morning, Thomas. Morning, Fiona. Morning, Mr. E. The numbers are climbing nicely. Morning, Jane, Helen, William, Stuart, Thomas. Morning, Martin, John, Brian. Hello there. Morning, Stephen. Morning, Jen. Alexander. Linda. Right, that's up there, the 100 mark, so let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indy Truck Davey out the truck and at home in his office in Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. But it's not a bad morning at this point in time, 5 degrees dry at the moment. Right, so that's the news review for the 30th of the 1st, 2023. Monday started with a mixed bag in the rags, the Daily Record, and the two right-wing loony rags go on suspension of moving trans prisoners to women's facilities. The right-wing loony rag, the Fail says, shamed Sturgeon in new U-turn over trans prisoners. Never heard so much crap in all your life. Oofed. Anyway, the Justice Secretary has ordered a review of the SPS transgender policy. The SPS uses individual risk assessments to risk the danger of trans people to others and the gender that they are claiming to be. Now that's in line with UK equalities law and similar processes are in place in England and Wales, so nothing to see here. Move along. Right, the Times, the Nationals, and the others go on. The fallout from Sunak sacking Salawi. The headlines, they go for what took so long Sunak to sack him, and to Sunak's allies blame Johnson for Tory sleaze after PM sacks Salawi. Now that one cracked me up, folks. So there's a Davy says Sunak's allies blame Tory sleaze on Johnson. Wow. Sunak was the Chancellor that oversaw England's £37 billion track and trace wheeze. Sunak wrote off £4 billion in dodgy bounce-back loans. Sunak oversaw the crooked PPE scandal and the VIPOA, writing off £9 billion worth of crap PPE. By the way, there's a PS for that. That £9 million worth of crap PPE is costing the UK taxpayer £700,000 a day to store as it's being disposed of. Sunak was the Chancellor when Lord Agnews quit as the anti-corruption advisor, saying the Cabinet and Number 11 had made no attempts to stop corruption, and there was no due diligence in almost anything that was done during the pandemic. Sunak was also Chancellor when Zalawi was being investigated by HMRC. I'm sure Sunak would have been briefed on it. Sunak's current Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, broke company house rules, restructuring a company that he co-founded to save £100,000 a year in personal tax to Jeremy Hunt. I'm sure HMRC had something to say about that at the time in 2018. So Sunak's been right at the heart of the Boris Johnson administration. He's been fined twice, one for Partygate and one for no wearing his seatbelt. Wow. Sunak supporters claim that the sleaze was Bojo's fault. No, Sunak was right there, right next to Bojo, almost every step of the way. Thanks, John, the van driving legend, still a driving god. It all helps, John. Thanks for super chat. All right. The Heraldette runs on a healthcare story. The Herald says GP surgeries in the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board area are closing the list to new patients due to heavy workloads. I didn't have time to look into that one yet, but I'm not going to look into that one because that just doesn't sound right. So we've got a wee look into that one. All right. Right, moving on. Monday started in Scotland on a couple of business stories. Lee's Confectionery Group sold for 5.7 million to Welsh Finsbury Food Group, and Scottish gold mining company Scottish Gold Resources are ramping up production to 57 kilograms a month, worth roughly 3 million quid. They also intend to open up new mines nearby the original mine at the moment, right? So, more money for the Westminster coffers. Maybe the local community will benefit. The people working in the mine maybe get something into the local community. But Keir Ching for Westminster again, eh? Right, okay, moving on Monday, and it's announced the Westminster Equalities Committee to hear legal advice on the Scotland's GRR bill. They will hear from two top advocates, one who believes the bill does not affect UK-wide equality laws and doesn't think the Section 35 order should stand. And the other thinks that it does breach UK equalities law, and the Equalities Committee will take evidence for both of them, plus two top lawyers, barristers, working in the field of equalities. All right, so that should be interesting. Jen Daly, thank you very much. For that donation. Right, moving on. Here in Scotland on Monday, the rolling teacher strike goes on. Monday sees disruption to classrooms in Aberdeenshire and the Borders. Strikes are set to escalate in February with all-out strike days. At the moment, it's rolling across the 32 councils, so you won't get two council areas half a day. But the EIS are talking about all-out strike days in February, so that's to be escalated. Right, speaking of which, Monday, in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers warn the public of major disruption on Wednesday in England and Wales as 100,000 public sector workers go on strike. Later on Monday, we may as well cover it while we're talking about strikes. Later that day in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers, the Tories passed the minimum service bill by 315 votes to 246 votes. Right, it will now advance to the Lords for scrutiny before it passes into law. Why do we say advances now to the Lords for scrutiny? Because whatever amendments they lay, if they lay any, will just be bounced for the Tories back in the House, the Commons chamber. So this minimum service bill is coming into law, folks, and that's the biggest whack to human rights the UK has seen ever. It's not just human rights that are being undermined here, it's also democratic rights. The human right and the democratic right to a collective bargaining and to withdraw your labour, these are basic rights. and they're about to be taken from 6 major sectors here in the UK. And by the time the EU reform a retained a law bill goes through, and ministers get the power to rip up whatever they want, because remember, it's ministers, not the Commons, that do that, then you can see the labour markets in the UK being deregulated. And we have watched that going on for the last few years. Eddie, thanks very much. And Wolfpet, thanks very much for those donations to the charitable fund. Thank you. So, workers' rights are out the window. Strike action as an effective way of negotiating and collective bargaining is off the table. Just a matter how long the Lords can hold this thing up in the Lords before it hits the statute books. Nurses, teachers, people in the transport sector, border guards, fire and rescue, they could all face the strike if they don't go to work when ordered to go to work by the sectors they work in. And the sectors themselves, the ministers of all those sectors, will set what the minimum service availability will be. So you could see that 75% to 80% of workers having to go to work, making the strikes ineffective. Take the legislation which allowed poverty. Thank you very much, Ali. That's very generous. The bill that was passed recently to allow employers to bring in agency workers to fill the voids when employees go on strike. In this gig economy and a declining economy, strike is not going to be an effective way of a protest or public bargaining anymore. The only thing that could be done is that we can show this law is not workable by ignoring it. Can he sack on the nurses, the fire brigade firemen? You can't replace them. Right, moving on Monday. And down that road, William Shawcross, the Commissioner for Public Appointments, steps away from the inquiry into Richard Sharp's appointment as the BBC Director General, BBC Chair, after arranging an £800,000 loan for Bodo the Clown. Now, why is Mr. Shawcross, the Public's Appointments Commissioner, stepping away from this case? Well, Mr. Shawcross was the Public's Appointment Commissioner who appointed Richard Shawcross, Richard Shaw, the Director, Chairman of the BBC, or Director General, whatever the title is. Anyway, Mr. Shawcross, William Shawcross, the Commissioner for Public Appointments, says the reason he's stepping back for inquiry is previous dealings with Mr. Richard Shaw, Mr. Sharp, Mr. Richard Sharp, who was appointed Director General by this guy. You couldn't make it up, the plot thickens. So the guy who was appointed to do the inquiry into the BBC, new director, new chairperson being put into position, is the guy that put him into position. Oof, you couldn't make that up. Right, what other nonsense did we hear yesterday? Why, Bodo the Clown says Putin threatened a missile strike on, one would assume, the UK or London, on the run-up to the start of the Ukraine war, which is coming towards its first full year anniversary, unfortunately. Anyway, the Kremlin says Bojo the Clown is talking crap. Right, moving on Monday. The US Army General says UK no longer has a viable defence or fighting force. And a stark warning to Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, the US says the UK has not got a viable force that they put into action, and if they did get into action, they'd run out of ammunition within a few days. The UK lacks the ability to defend its skies against missile and drone strikes on the level that we're seeing in the Ukraine, apparently. And it would take 5 to 10 years for the UK to be able to field a viable fighting division of 25 to 30,000 troops. Backed up with helicopters and tanks, apparently just don't have the stuff. Right. Now, the US also tell Ben Wallace the majority of the UK Army's fleet of vehicles, including tanks, were built between 30 and 60 years ago, and they're not due to be replaced for years to come. Wow. So the equipment that our army is working with now was built 30, 60 years ago. You couldn't make it up. Thank you, Fiona. That's very nice of you. Thank you. Right, anyway, apparently the UK defence spending needs to increase by $3 billion a year, and massive recruitment drive is needed, apparently, with army personnel at only 72,000 full-time soldiers. And that's due to be cut again, apparently. Right, and apparently half the UK battle-ready forces are reservists, including mobile at the times required by NATO. So the UK is worrying the NATO bloc. So much for bigger, stronger, better together, eh? There was also a report out in the UK Defence Journal by some wacky professor saying that Scotland's shipbuilding wouldn't be viable if Scotland became independent, because Scotland's shipbuilding is geared up for heavy warship building, and Scotland apparently wouldn't need heavy warships. It would apparently be the sort of defence force that Norway, Southern Ireland has. We just a coastal fleet of small boats to protect the shore. What a lot of crap, of course. Scotland will need to take a full part in protecting the North West Passage, so we will definitely need warships. Definitely. Aye, thanks to John and Jen for donating, David. Aye. Okay, moving on. Monday, and the International Monetary Fund revises down the UK's economic outlook. This is in all the papers this morning, folks, but this report came out last night. Okay. It had originally said that there would be 0 to 0.1% growth in the UK economy. That was the IMF and the OECD's predictions. Now they're predicting a contraction of 0.6%, and 2024 it'll flatline. So they're saying the recession is going to be deeper and it's going to take longer to get out of. All right. Now, the IMF also tells us that the UK economy is the only G7 economy not to have bounced back on opening up from the pandemic. The other G7 economies have grown. The UK's economy has shrunk, and that's backed up by figures shown by the Office of National Statistics, which tells us that not just have exports to the EU fallen, exports to the rest of the world are also down and in decline. Okay, now, the UK economy's folks is in contraction, and the IMF says it's gone faster than what they expected it to be. We also know that inward investment in the UK is down 11% since the UK fully left the EU, and the GDP has already dropped by 5.5%. So, not looking good. The IMF and the OECD have revised the outlook for the UK in 2023, and the economy is in contraction. In the full report, they say they expect unemployment to rise and things like that as well. And it's broken down, but you can use your search engine to get the IMF support. You're just treating you like an idiot here. You know how to use a search engine. Just look for the IMF's economic outlook for the UK 2023. Okay. So not good, folks. Right, moving on. Monday, and more Tory party squeeze, the investigation into Dominic Raab's bullying accusations started taking evidence from senior civil servants. Could the Deputy Prime Minister's head be about to roll? That's all Sunak needs right now, eh? Mental. That could be the thing that strikes him. Right, also Monday, Bojo the Clown makes a bid to get back into the Westminster Criminal Cabal's cabinet by throwing his hat into the ring to replace Zawawi as Tory party chair. So Bojo's thrown his hat in the ring to become the next Tory party chair in the hope that he will get promoted to minister without portfolio in Rishi Sunak's government. Don't see that happening to any use. Moving on, Monday, and firefighters UK-wide vote to go on strike over pay and conditions. Now, 80% of members of the Firemen's Union UK-wide, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, 80% of them have voted to take strike action. Pressure mounts on this government through strike action. Now, all it would take is for these trade unions to start coordinating and to have a general strike to bring this bloody corrupt cabal down. And on the bright side, it's looking that way with tomorrow's industrial action involving 100,000 civil servants at one time. Right, moving on. Monday, back here in Scotland, and a Constitution Minister, Angus Robertson, tells us that a vote for independence is a vote to rejoin the EU. Also Monday, cross-party, countries grouping within the EU Parliament, Progressive Alliance, I think it was, who've just elected the new leader in the European Parliament, says that David backed Scotland's application to rejoin the EU. Okay, so that's the stories I picked out for yesterday to discuss. There was a lot more out there, but I thought they were the main ones. As far as Ukraine goes yesterday, apparently Kazan took a right pelting yesterday. But the Russians are being repelled, and the other thing I'm hearing is that Putin's got a recruitment problem in Russia. They don't want to fight. All right, so let's have a wee look and see what the rags have got to say this morning, shall we? Where are we? Right, Scotland's paper, Magic Circle scandal and firefighters vote to strike. And what's this? Lawyers knew he was a beast but did nothing. The Daily Record's front page features victims of so-called Magic Circle scandal. Mark Redwood Thompson waives his right to anonymity to tell the papers about the abuse he suffered as a child from lawyer John Watts. Don't know anything about the story, unfortunately. The Herald has firefighters vote to strike for first time in 20 years over pay. The Scotsman has firefighters vote to strike for first time in 20 years over pay. The Times has SNP readies army after firefighters strike vote. SNP doesn't read the army. That'll be happening right across the UK. But even if the SNP government was to ask for use of the army and their firefighting equipment, well, last time I looked, we're all still part of this heinous union, and we all still paid tax. The National has conspiracy of silence on damage to Scotland. Robertson takes aim at Labour as well as the Tories, warning the impact of leaving EU will continue to be felt regardless of which party is in power in Westminster. And that happens to be the truth. It doesn't matter which of the parties are going to be in power in Westminster, there is no growing this economy, and the damage will continue to be done. Supply chains in the EU, we've spoken about this before, have already realigned, and the chances of the 2025 negotiations to look at the deal we have with the EU right now are slim to bugger all. Slim to nothing. Nuts. The Express has Sturgeon is making up rules on the hoof. What? What rules is she making up in the hoof? Apparently she gave a toe curling interview about transgender. Never seen that, eh? Don't know what it's all about. The Telegraph is economy to shrink after tax rate says IMF. And the Metro has no time to lie, and that's about Kremlin denies Boris Johnson's claim of death threat. The Looney Rag the Field has now 1 in 4 can't get in to see their GPs. I think we're going to have to look into GP services here, folks. All the testimony I've got on GP services has all been positive. Right, what's the Star go today? If I go to the Star, where is it? And the Daily Star of Scotland has people cutting back on bog roll during cost of living crisis. We've really hit the skids as the headline. There's a Star just to cheer us up on a Tuesday. Okie dokie. That's what I've got for you today, folks. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it informative. I want to thank everybody that's given us a super chat. Remember, support the independent media, Sport Broadcast in Scotland, Independence Live, and the live radio, Caledon Media, Truth Radio, the iScot magazine, the national newspaper, independent bloggers and bloggers. And if we get a crowdfunder going for any reason, whether it be for charity or because that's how they support themselves, if you've got a couple of quid and you can throw it in the pot to help us out. And thanks very much. As you know, Dave and I have recently turned on super chat so we can donate money to food banks. And with your help, hopefully will help to feed some more people in Scotland. Okie dokie. Right, now eyes on the prize, folks. Things are really starting to heat up again. But this is a time when we want to talk about independence, but we don't actually want to be talking about individual parties. We need to get back to how we campaigned in 2012 and 13, where we all spoke about the issues involved rather than having a pop at each other. So eyes on the prize. Get out there and win hearts and minds, all right? Follow the last couple of bits of guidance. Clean hands and surfaces regularly. If you're not feeling well, show some social conscience and mask up. All right? First one of the week out the way. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again. You guys, look after yourselves. Have a nice day.